Ethan, are you surprised by what events of today?
Shock, but not surprise, I would say.
Go on.
Well, as in the timing of it was unexpected.
Yes.
But what happened is, I don't know, when I was watching that press conference with Farage and Jenrick together, it sort of felt weird that we've never really seen them in the same room before, because it sort of fitted in a,
Yeah, I guess the thing for me is I already have sort of press conference myopia, which is that the day starts with Badenoch taking the quite extraordinary step of sacking him in this fashion. I was talking about it with Tom McTague, and we were reaching for, like, has this happened before? When is the last example of basically the leader of the party coming to blows to such an extent with their main rival that they separate? And Thatcher Heseltine, I think, possibly.
Or Jeremy Corbyn, Keir Starmer 2020.
Yeah, but it's not. Yeah. Yeah, okay, fair point. Not quite the same.
We did all think immediately, is this AI? Is it a deep fake video? Just because there was no warning, because Kemi Badenoch made the video at quite short notice.
Blurred background.
And I'm not saying she looks like an AI generated version of herself, but there was a moment where, given the AI stories that we've had earlier this week, we were all just a bit like, is this real? And it is.
And it is, and she appears to have acted quite decisively.
Yeah. Points to Kemi, actually. I think played a weak hand well. I think it's been an open secret that Robert Jenrick wants her job. It's been an open secret that Robert Jenrick is open, or has been open, to the possibility of joining Reform. And because he's quite popular with a particular wing of the Tory party, she has been hamstrung in her ability to deal with him. So it seems like they got this evidence, extracts of a speech left on a printer or whatever it was, and she just pounced instantly. And I think that has made a defection that would have been incredibly damaging to her and the Conservatives not quite a win, but at least neutral, or certainly a lot less damaging than it would have been. This is not the way that either Robert Jenrick or Nigel Farage wanted this to go.
Yeah. Farage said in his press conference this afternoon, actually, didn't he, that Jenrick wasn't actually necessarily going to join Reform.
He said 60-40.
Negotiations until Kemi did what she did today. I mean, do we believe him? Ethan, do we take that at face value? Like, from your reporting?
Jenrick might not have...
Yeah, there was an open question before today.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing with Robert Jenrick, right? I mean, his conversion to a belief that the Conservative Party is doomed and can never, kind of do anything to save Britain also happens to be conveniently in line with his prospects to become leader of the Conservative Party. I mean, that's it, right? It's just like, it's extraordinary to watch a press conference in which somebody goes through and just monsters all of their colleagues in the shadow cabinet, like Priti Patel and Mel Stride. Not that I hold a candle for any of those people. I'm just saying that, just openly saying they're terrible, awful politicians, hypocrites, liars. You said you wanted to be leader of the Tory party about a year ago. You were in the shadow cabinet until 11 o'clock this morning. Yeah, it's just so. I mean, who knows with somebody who's driven that much by ambition, which way they might go.
This is it for me, Rachel. I appreciate there are defections, that parties have, wings which maybe not overlap, but perhaps touch each other, that there is a closeness and people can move across. But when you're talking about someone who up until very recently, just over a year ago, was saying, no, I actually want to drink from the poison chalice of leading the Conservative Party after that election result. I am prepared to do it, right? I will do that job. Such is my care for this. He said it in his presser, right? He joined the Tories in 1997 in Wolverhampton. That's not necessarily the behaviour of someone who is necessarily an opportunist.
That was his sort of teenage rebellion at school. Talking about trying to not be like the other kids. Anyway, not relevant.
Yeah, but this is the thing is, he blamed everyone from Tony Blair through to the last Conservative government of which he was a part, and everyone in between. Ethan's right. He didn't pull his punches. He named Priti Patel and Mel Stride, and I wonder how compelling people find it as a political offering to say, actually, we really broke the country, and now I'm a part of this party, and you should vote for it.
Well, I think the comments from some of his members of his local association after this are kind of quite significant. They've kind of been going, we supported you, you've thrown a grenade into the lives and the careers of people who were up until a few hours ago, like working on your behalf or had worked very hard on your behalf. And I think there was no way for him to make this move, though, if he was going to make the move, without utterly savaging the Conservative Party, because the first question was always going to be, and it was in that press conference, well, hang on, you were part of those governments. So, to show that you are adamant and you have changed, and it's a full-on holistic conversion. You've got to really, really, really go for it against your former colleagues. You can't kind of go, I think we did good work, but now I think maybe Nigel's a better prospect. That doesn't work. So he was always going to have to do it. But in terms of whether this was inevitable, I'm not saying that I automatically take at face value every single word that Nigel Farage always says every day. But from speaking to people in the Jenrick camp and having spoken to them previously, I do think that it was an open conversation. It was something that maybe was going to happen. I think Jenrick was keeping his options open. I think he was looking to take over after the local elections in May, when the Conservatives are going to do very badly, possibly not as badly as they would need to do for him to get the leadership. I don't think it was imminent, and I certainly don't think it was planned for this afternoon. So everyone was scrambling a bit. But Farage framed it. I mean, Farage had the opportunity for the real banter option, which would have been to say no. And I think that would have been hilarious and actually solidified one of Reform's key messages, which is that it's not just about taking a whole load of failed Tories. And there's a risk to taking Jenrick in reputational terms, in Jenrick's ambition terms, in terms of party cohesion, because as we talked about on Monday, a lot of people in grassroots reform don't like all these former Tory figures leapfrogging them and going straight to the top. But there are benefits of it too. And so Nigel Farage chose not to go for the banter option, which I'm slightly disappointed about.
Let's talk a little bit more about those ambitions then. I mean, Robert Jenrick is someone who, like we've said, stood for the leadership of the Tory party. He is a high-profile political figure on the right of British politics. For a very long time, whichever political party Nigel Farage has led, they have been almost cults of personality around him. And he's now got this sort of Praetorian guard of big figures around him, hasn't he?
Yeah, I don't know how big a figure Robert Jenrick really is, to be honest. I mean, it's this Westminster thing of like, oh, this guy came second in a Tory party leadership election that happened a few months after they got absolutely destroyed in a general election. I don't know how famous that makes you. I think he's obviously famous in Westminster. He's, everybody knows he's like one of those kind of minor celebrities in that bubble. But the 6 o'clock news broadcast tonight, when it's maybe the main story or the second story, depending on what the editors choose, that will be his real introduction, I think, to most people in the real world, as a Tory who's gone over to the Reform party. So,
what do you think he gets though out of making the move? What, like, if he thinks the Conservative Party's over, he's doing this out of self-interest. Does he want a job in a Reform cabinet?
I think undoubtedly probably wants a job in a Reform cabinet.
They must
quite a big one as well.
They have about 6 different people who want to be Chancellor.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, that was the thing about Nadhim Zahawi this week. The Nadhim Zahawi's defection was strange because every headline about it was, including ours, was that a former Chancellor of the Exchequer has defected to Reform. Of course, Nadhim Zahawi served as Chancellor of the Exchequer for 63 days in the sort of tail end of the Boris Johnson premiership and never delivered a fiscal statement and was basically just being investigated by HMRC for tax questions.
He had to pay them £5 million quid.
But said he wasn't under investigation.
Yeah.
And then in early 2023 was sacked as chair of the Tory party by Rishi Sunak for having obscured the true facts around that. And Zahawi at that press conference just spoke about how he used to be vaccines minister. It was just about how he was, the guy who did vaccine deployment during COVID, because he didn't really want to talk about his time as chancellor because he knows it was a bit of a wet fart. So, I don't think Zahawi is probably going to be the Chancellor of the Exchequer, not least because I spoke to people in Reform and they said he's not, pretty categorically. Jenrick, on the other hand, I mean, he was Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury for a while, so he's held a finance brief. And he has, he's been a cabinet minister.
When was he Exchequer Secretary?
Oh God, I think it was.
I lose track.
It was before he was housing. It was before he was housing. So it must have been under May.
So this very neatly leads me to my next point, which is that Robert Jenrick has been on a political journey. He is really closely tied, not just to the Sunak administration, the Johnson administration. He's been a figure in the Conservative Party under David Cameron, right? Like he is there, he is present. So how does he get to where he is now, Rachel? Like, and talk me through the changes in Robert Jenrick's politics.
Well, he starts off, and I probably shouldn't have admitted that I'd forgotten that he was Treasury Secretary. What was he?
Executive Secretary.
There we go.
But he's had a lot of jobs.
He's had a lot of jobs. So when he was sort of came to prominence, it was as housing secretary. It was the first millennial housing secretary. We were all like, great, we've got a millennial in charge, maybe somebody who understands the housing crisis. And then you realise that he and his wife are incredibly wealthy and have 4 properties. Like they've got nice houses. But he was this kind of Cameroon, slick, modern, quite bouncy figure. He's always had a lot of energy. I'm just remembering that Andrew Marr referred to him, I think, on this podcast as a very ambitious blur that I just think sums it up perfectly. So then he's sacked from that job or is moved from that job. His narrative for that is he wanted to rip up planning rules and build loads more houses because he understood that houses are really important for, younger generations and for the economy. And Michael Gove and others did not want that. So he loses that job. Then he is Sunak's immigration minister. And the narrative for that was that Sunak had to put Suella Braverman as Home Secretary to kind of win her support and stop her from, this is Tory deep history now, stop her from challenging him in autumn 2022 when Liz Truss blew herself up. And so he wanted somebody in the Home Office that was like his guy who could moderate the loose cannon that was Suella Braverman. That was the narrative. And Jenrick goes in and his narrative is that he found it, quote unquote, in ashes, and that he was sort of radicalised by just how incompetent and chaotic and how the Home Office in general, particularly the immigration system had got. There's another narrative, which is that when Suella Braverman was sacked in November over, I think it was homelessness comments, or she was trying to get herself sacked. She got herself sacked. Jenrick thought that he was going to get promoted. And instead of him being promoted, Sunak ennobles David Cameron to be Foreign Secretary, moves James Cleverly to be Home Secretary, and keeps Jenrick where he is. And he just loses patience with the whole thing. And a couple of months later, he resigns over the Rwanda bill not being tough enough. And that's his story. His truth is that he had to resign from that government because they weren't being tough enough on immigration. You may choose to read it a different way.
What does he think, Ethan? What are his politics?
Long pause.
I mean, it depends on the year.
No.
It's so deadpan and so accurate.
Well, look, I mean, he did the kind of Tory shtick that people do. When he defected today, he said, the Conservative Party is part of the party of Peel and Churchill and Thatcher. I'm not sure what single conclusion you would draw from the three, other than, doing the job quite well and still being remembered long after being dead. As in, I just mean to say that Churchillian and Thatcherite politics are not necessarily the same when it comes to, economic questions or whatnot.
No, they're just the ones that the Tories cite when they mean, I want to be successful.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Which kind of, what Rachel says kind of answers your question, right?
Yeah.
What does he believe in? Being powerful,
successful, having power.
He also believes in, and this is me trying to be really fair, he believes in self-improvement so much. His political style has improved massively since the leadership contest. He got a team around him of young people who were like, you should do videos where you chase after fare dodgers on the tube. And he did that and he made an impact. He's worked on his delivery. He's been on Ozempic and done marathons to kind of the 3 Peaks Challenge, I think, to sort of work on his image because voters don't like a fat politician. They just don't. And so, if you think of Kemi Badenoch as going into politics as I am absolutely perfect and everything that I think is right and the way I do politics is right because it's the way I do politics, he's kind of the opposite. He has worked very, very hard to try and be what he thinks the voters want him to be. And I think that speaks to the ambition, right? Whatever you want me to be, I'll be it.
I should just say one of the things, by the way, because, I mean, that was maybe a bit mean. No, but it's to say that there is an argument that Jenrick genuinely has since the resignation, which he talks about quite a lot in that press conference, the resignation in November, I think it was November 23, over Rwanda, that he has kind of, the scales have fallen from his eyes. He's kind of embraced a slightly declinist view of Britain. I don't mean declinist as in favour of decline. I mean like the sort of Corelli Barnett kind of thing of like, oh no, everything's really, really messed up and things are getting worse. And there are people in the Tory party who like Jenrick because he is one of the senior figures who has been willing to say that. One of the interesting things at that conference today was he gave us a slight sneak peek inside, the world of the Tory shadow cabinet in the year of our Lord 2026, which is, he said they had a debate recently about whether Britain was broken or not. And he said it was categorically. He said instinctively he felt that. Whereas other Tories, they have the slightly more boosterish, Boris-y thing of still going, oh, it's fine if we just, cut regulation and tweak a few things. Everything will be fine. People will be, making money again and we can cut taxes and it'll be great. And he said personally that was his big division with the rest of the senior echelons of the Conservative Party, which is that they think things can broadly carry on as was, and it'll be all right. And he thinks that some kind of radical break is needed, and that radical break is, the destruction of the old party system, the collapse of the Conservative Party, the rise of reform, the installation of Nigel Farage as Prime Minister, a Conservative revolution. Yeah.
Yeah. He also said that there's a third group, which were people who said it is broken, but we can't say that because it's the Conservative Party that broke it. And that goes back to the point about him trashing his former colleagues, because that is pretty damning.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I thought he was pretty clear-eyed about a lot of the problems in Britain. The things he pointed out are things that I would point out. He was talking about stagnant wages, talking about a housing crisis, barely functioning public services. He was obviously light on policy. He's only just joined the party, but I don't think it necessarily follows that the things he singled out, which were massively cutting immigration and burning fossil fuels and rejecting net zero, are necessarily solutions to those problems. Jenrick said the Tories have lost their competence and backbone and that rotten Tories broke Britain. Ethan, how much do we think this is going to hurt the Conservative Party, if at all?
Well, I think the trajectory of decline is already sort of quite well advanced, right? Farage himself seems to admit that. I mean, he said the deadline for defections is the 7th of May.
He said that a lot.
Yeah, he kept repeating it, which basically means if you're a I don't want to say Tory rat, but if you're fleeing the sinking ship of the Conservative Party, do it sooner rather than later, because we're not just taking the dregs when things go really bad. I.e., if the Conservative Party is basically destroyed in the country, loses all of its councillors or a large part of them, and then is reduced to a rump in the House of Commons. So I don't know whether Jenrick's defection really changes that picture. The argument that Kemi Badenoch's people would make is that she acted decisively today because she was in a position of strength, and the reason she's in a position of strength, or at least a relative one compared to where she was, say, a year ago, is because she's seen some mild polling bounce. I mean, the opinion within the party is still divided as to whether this is kind of real or slightly, as in it may be cope, as they say.
Yeah. There's a couple of points, isn't it? They're on 20-ish, and so if that's a rise from 18, how material is it?
And she did take over when they were leading at 25.
Yeah.
So it's maybe a slight bounce back. I think the amnesty deadline of May the 7th is really, really interesting, because I have spoken, again, to Defect and Reform, who are worried about this idea of a deluge of failed Tories, and there was a sort of suggestion that there should be a deadline. Now, how you do that deadline, does it just apply to people who've been Conservative MPs? Does it apply to people who were Conservative councillors? Because they need a lot of candidates. Sarah Pochin was a Conservative councillor. Leila Cunningham, who's going to be their candidate for Mayor of London, was a Conservative councillor. So actually, Farage made the point when he was challenged on how many failed Tories, not that Jenrick is a failed Tory, he won his seat, but how many Tories can you accept? He made this point that you do need people with experience, and that he had someone in one council go in and who knew how councils worked, and it went a lot better than the councils were, where they were complete newbies and nobody knew how anything worked. So I think it's a call to arms specifically for current Conservative MPs. I don't think it's going to apply to councillors and other activists or whatever. The question of who's next is interesting, because if I were Robert Jenrick and I were trying to orchestrate my defection, I'd want to go with a procession of sitting Tory MPs behind me for two reasons. One, because it makes the most impact, and two, because it solidifies his status within Reform. He hasn't just defected, he's gone and he's brought people with.
Well, he could build a caucus within the party, right? If 5
if
MPs
he's
come
got
with
that.
him. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, having not been able to do it the way that he would have wanted to do it, thanks to Kemi Badenoch acting decisively, that opportunity is gone. So, that one thing that Kemi Badenoch managed to do today is stem that momentum and deny him that opportunity.
Ethan, are there names floating around Westminster for who else might be on defection watch?
I noticed that because he only really spoke about people in order to say that they were crap, but the one person he did praise was Suella Braverman as one of the kind of immigration
hawks.
Yeah, as one of the immigration hawks in the former, in the Sunak ministry, who was on the same side as him. But obviously there are a number of people who supported Robert Jenrick in the Tory party leadership election. I think Esther McVeigh has already ruled herself out as a defector. She said she's a loyal Tory. Jacob Rees-Mogg was stopped by a BBC camera crew today, and he said he's still a Tory. So I'm not sure there will be a kind of march to follow him. The question will probably be, will this Farage deadline have a sort of inspiring effect on people who are
focusing minds?
Focusing minds, yeah. We'll wait to see. There is obviously, I think you mentioned it before, Rachel, but there's the problem of, does Nigel Farage and Do Reform actually want... There's a kind of fine balance to strike, because you get a good headline when something like this happens. But if every single day of the week is just some absolute no-mark Tory kind of trust junior minister coming over to the Tory party, it's like, makes you look, it does the whole, turquoise Tories attack, or they're just a ragbag of political failures who want another go at the top job and all the rest of it. I'm not saying that applies to Jenrick necessarily, but there's a kind of balance. You want people to come over so you look like you've got momentum, but you don't want so many to come over that you just look like the reconstructed
absolutely
2022 Tory party.
It's an attack line used by the Labour Party is same old Tories. That's what they call. That's what they've been calling Reform. I thought it was interesting that in this press conference, both Jenrick and Farage, mostly Jenrick, they were invoking the existential language that Starmer himself has been using, or started to use towards the end of last year when he was talking about reform. It does appear that there's this. Both parties are slightly sort of speaking about this next election in these really stark terms that essentially...
Apocalyptic.
Yeah. If you vote for either Starmer or Farage, the country will be a smouldering wreck unless you elect us. Farage also mentioned that there's going to be a Labour defector next week.
Yeah,
he said that a few times.
Yeah.
He was touting that. Do you think there's anyone of the sort of same caliber as Robert Jenrick? The same? Are we talking about someone from the government crossing the aisle?
That would be David Lammy. That was Robert Jenrick's opposite number.
Yeah,
I don't think David Lammy's going to be joining the Reform.
I don't think so either.
The name that I've heard floating around is Kate Hoey, who is now in the Lords, but obviously was a Labour MP, quit the Labour Party in 2019. So I'm not quite sure if that fits the description. But she obviously campaigned with Farage on the referendum. So watch this space.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to say anybody's name without having sort of texted them.
Yeah.
But there are former Labour MPs, extraordinarily kind of esoteric figures from, mid-Blair days who kind of served 1 or 2 terms as MPs who are now extraordinarily right-wing and write Substack blogs. So, look, I mean, it depends on your definition of senior, doesn't it? Right.
If Jenrick can go on a journey, why can't a middle-tier politician from the Blair years?
And also Reform, I've got to say, a bit of respect for Reform's press operation. They have this brilliant way of kind of summoning a press conference and getting everybody in the lobby very excited. I've had ones before where they say, we're going to have a conference on Saturday, we're going to unveil all these defectors, and you think, oh my God, it's going to be Suella this time. And then it's 20 councillors. And fair enough, respect to councillors, and they have an important role in the kind of body politic. But I think, they know how to ramp up expectations and then sort of let people down lightly and still get a few decent headlines. So I don't know the senior Labour figure. Let's come back in a week or two and see
how senior the figure is.
Yeah. Earlier this week, they sent out, I think, 20 different press releases about 20 different individual councillors who had defected. So they do have a good media game. They also, and I love this, they sent out the full transcript of Jenrick's speech while he was still speaking, about 7 minutes before he finished speaking. So you could follow along.